Hello, guys, and welcome to the Divine Witch Podcast. Today, I got with me Brian Morgan, and we are going to be discussing a lot of things magical, including ceremonial magic. Brian, would you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Brian Morgan, and I've been a part of the pagan community for at least 15, 20 years now. And I've started running Ohio Valley Pagan Society back in 2012 to bring pagans together. And I practice all forms of magic, and my religious path is a Celtic pagan, specifically Irish Celtic paganism. And, I guess we'll get to know a little bit more as we go along. So.
All right. And what started you on your journey?
So I guess my journey would go back to about when I was 14 years old, and I realized I was good at summoning, and I was just kind of trying to find my way in my path and just discover who I am. It was never a question of am I pagan or anything like that. I knew I was. It was just trying to discover what to do with the abilities that I had. And then right around the time I turned 24, 25, I found rune magic. And that was the first time I really discovered the ability to, well, it was like my foundation on what magic is, and how to discipline myself and go through an actual system. I had like a spiritual calling around 2001, and it was it's kind of like I worked with it was like the Morgan, the goddess, Celtic Irish goddess. The Morgan came to me, and she kind of gave me over to Odin to work the runes, and then I kind of worked that way through that, and then continue on to through ceremonial magic, and then I worked through Egyptian magic, and so it was like my path has just been more of it's something I have to do, not necessarily it wasn't like something I picked. It was just like not being able to practice magic was like not being able to breathe. It was like ingrained in me. I had to do it. So.
Okay. And since you've been in it for a while, what do you think is your most struggle with your path?
Well, I've really overcome most of my struggles and most of my undertakings, I guess. My biggest struggle is really just financial, because I want to do a lot of stuff that's in other countries.
Right.
When I was in Ireland, I did a lot of ritual work on sacred sites. And since I did Egyptian stuff a while back, there's still some stuff I need to do in Egypt, which is a bucket list of mine. And really, it's just time and money, having time to do it all.
So with that being said, what do you think, when it comes to like special talents, things like that, we all have our little something that we do. Like me personally, I'm very good with spirits, reading, things like that. What do you think would be your special little talent?
The ability to summon spirits, talk to spirits, feel them and hear them. I guess spirit communication in general. That's something I've like always been born with. It's like I know them everywhere where they are. So that, and being a really strong empath, I can feel pretty much everything.
It's both a blessing and a curse, isn't it?
Yes.
So with that being said, when I was snooping on your website, it said that you had an experience when you were younger that kind of brought this to you. Was it something that has happened with other people in your family? Was it only you? You know what I mean?
Well, my mom's side of the family, they whether or not they want to admit it, they've all had some type of psychic ability. and they've all been drawn to that. My mom has, my aunt has, and my grandma has. They're not necessarily pagan, but so they don't know. They never went through and tried to harness it or control it or anything. They just knew that they had it, and it's just kind of been passed down through the family, I would think.
Right. One of those things where they're like messages from God,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
So with that kind of like upbringing versus what you do now, I mean, you've been doing this for a while. What was their initial reaction? Like the reason I asked that is because we all have a story from where we went from one thing to another, and some people are still afraid to come out of the closet a little bit. So,
Well, well, first of all, I had to live through that whole satanic panic era. So when I was a teenager, my mom like would freak out thinking I was, into devil worship and everything was Satan, especially with music. And so I didn't really talk about it with her too much. It wasn't until I got older, I guess in my early 20s, I never really shied away from it. And my mother didn't really care. My father, he didn't really care either. He just wanted me to, follow whatever made me happy. He never judged me, and he was a Christian, but he didn't judge me being pagan or anything like that. He was really supportive. I think my mom was a little freaked out. And then as I got older and doing readings and stuff, then my mom and my grandma were having me doing readings for them. So
I know, right? It's like the little medium part where people are like, well, I don't want to know, but since you can do it, show me what you got kind of thing.
right.
So with showing me what you got, what got you into the pagan community here in Ohio to where you actually just wanted to be out there? Because leadership is not easy. It takes time, dedication, money. So like, what got you started?
Well, first, I never seeked out to be a pagan leader. That was never my goal. It just kind of fell in my lap. But kind of the history of the pagan community in Cincinnati. So for a long time, through like the 90s, early 2000s, we had a group called Green Dome Temple, and they did all the pagan stuff. And then there was also the PCCO, which is the Pagan Community Council of Ohio. Those two groups. And then they both dissipated for whatever reasons around the mid 2000s. And so like there was this big period in Cincinnati, nobody was doing anything. There was no pagan anything. We had the witches ball. That was about it. So it was like after around about 2010, 2012, it's like, man, like, why isn't anybody doing anything? It's like, I just wanted to find more pagans to hang out with. And so I just decided to do a meetup at the park. And I had about 30 people show up. And then everybody seemed to enjoy it. And then a couple months later, I had another one, had about 60 people show up this time. And everybody kept wanting me to do it again. So I did it the following year. And then, and I still didn't even like have a name for it. I was just making pagan meetup groups. And then after, I think it was like after the third year, there's like, well, we need to start a group and a page and blah, blah, blah. So that's why I came up with the idea for Ohio Valley Pagan Society. And then I guess all the old pagans were seeing me do all this stuff. And so they started giving me all their groups to take over. It's like, what do I do with this? It's like, so I guess people had started seeing leadership qualities in me. So they started, wanting me to take over groups and go from there. And then it just built. And then the next thing I know, I'm asked to do the Festival of Faiths to represent the pagan community in front of all the other religions. And I know a lot of it had to do with, so before Ohio Valley Pagan meetups and all that, I was a fire performer for years, and I made a lot of contacts through the city. I learned how to brand yourself online. I learned about internet marketing, presentations, and just how to put yourself out there and market yourself as a business or a brand. And I took that knowledge and used it with the Ohio Valley Pagan Society, so we were easily accessible and easily to find online anywhere. So that was a big thing, because everybody was finding us, and because they couldn't find any other pagans or witches or anything, so like we was getting interviews, City Beat and radio shows. So it just kind of just grew on its own. I think more so the fact because we was easily accessible. And then, yeah, it just grew and grew. And each time, every year we had the Pagan Picnic. It's like, I think the biggest one we had was about 200 people. And it was like, all right, we just start, getting a reserved spot because the free ones are outgrowing themselves.
Right. Do you ever have that feeling like you just kind of step back sometimes and go, where am I? Because I know for a while there was the Ohio Pagan Alliance that was going on. You work with different groups. You got other groups that you partner with for Dagdas Cauldron, which helps set up little cauldrons throughout the cities and collect food. Like, it's a lot to go on. So like, how do you find the balance between your spiritual self and what you do for your own self?
Well, it was just like, it got to a point, especially now, it's like, okay, now you have a responsibility. It's like the gods put you in this position, and this is what they're tasked from you, because you're put here for a purpose. And so it was like, okay, you're in this leadership purpose. So now you can't just like up and quit, because you have this responsibility to the community, and now they're dependent on you. And if you quit, then it all crumbles and falls apart, because again, we go back to nobody else is doing it. So you just got to, keep going. And it's not about your personal needs. It's about the community's needs. And that's, as a leader, you got to understand about putting everybody else before yourself, so it can continue. So, I mean, it just merges together between my spiritual practice and my community work.
So speaking of giving self so much, you do a lot. Like, I was going through your different groups and organizations you're a part of, and I'm like, do you have time to breathe?
No.
With that being said, you kind of want to talk about it for anybody who may not know some of the things that you're a part of?
Groups or practices and all that? Is that what you're?
All of it.
All of it. All right. Well, I guess we'll start with, I was part of the Room Guild. I'm no longer, just because I had other stuff going on. Let's see. Well, we'll just go through my practices, what I've went through and what I've been initiated through. So my initiated practices, and just so we understand the idea of initiation, is that you're working through an entire course of material, and then a person or group would initiate you into that practice, where you would speak an oath to whatever divine being, what have you. So with those, let's see, of course, I went through runic practices, been initiated those, and I went through Aurum Solis, the Hermetic Order of Aurum Solis, which is a ceremonial magic group. Egyptian magic as an ossified magician. White Tara Buddhism from the Ganden Monastery that's here in Cincinnati. It's a Tibetan Buddhist group. Alexandrian witchcraft. At second degree, I could get my third degree at any time. I just time restraints. So that, I believe, is everything I'm initiated in. But I've also practiced shamanism. I took classes through Kinde He teaches authentic shamanism classes, and plus some other solo classes from other teachers, one-on-one classes here and there.
Right.
What else? So I can think of at the moment. I know there's more. I did go through the Golden Dawn. I went through their program. I'm not a part of the Golden Dawn, but I've worked through the majority of their books, and I did that self-initiation through there. So I think that's all of them. Well,
Now, as I was listening to you, I was like, oh my God. Like I knew of some, but I'm just like, that's a lot of time, a lot of dedication, a lot of years, and I give you kudos for that. Speaking of time and dedication, because we are here for ceremonial magic, so to speak, and since you have so many different belief systems, like how does it differ between each one, or does it really? For you, what are your main tools?
well, ceremonial magic is like the name suggests. It's a system of magic based on, well, not based on, but it'll be very, well, as it says, ceremonial ritual. You have long drawn out rituals. It's not like folk magic or certain aspects of witchcraft where you can just do a thing here. And, you know, with ceremonial magic, it's like you have rituals for your tools, your robes, everything you're going to use. That all have to be done during a certain day and time, and then you have your take them tools and use them in a ritual, which is also specifically timed. There's a lot of specifics to ceremonial magic. There's many different traditions of ceremonial magic. It's the idea of raising your consciousness. You're doing a lot of spirit communication. So you have this idea of low magic and high magic. Low magic being you are doing things that are affecting the material plane, things like getting money or getting a job, things that, you know, physical things. Or you have high magic, which is all about raising your consciousness and working with whatever spirit you're working with, be it, you know, gods, angels, demons, etc. But there's a lot of protection with that, because then you're opening gates to other worlds, so you need that protection around you. It's a lot of translated grimoire work that you could trace. A lot of them you could trace all the way back to the times of antiquity. A lot of these practices, like the school of the Pythagorean school that Pythagoras taught, and then a lot of other like Egyptian magic. And then, of course, I mean, there's so many different systems. I mean, the most notable being the Golden Dawn, and then you have the OTO. So, I mean, you could go on about the different groups. Order Aurum Solis, the group I was, I still am initiated in. They focused on Greek and Egyptian magic, and they do a lot of work through what is known as the Greek magical papyra and stuff like that. And, you know, they have their own personal practices.
So when it comes to ceremonial magic in itself, what do you think was the hardest thing to learn? Because like you said, there is so many different things that you have to do when it comes to time and learning and things like that. What was one of the things that you would have a tip for somebody who's about to get into it, so that way they don't have to struggle as hard?
The easiest way to get into ceremonial magic is the book Modern Magic by Donald Michael Craig. He took all the stuff, mostly Golden Dawn stuff, and it's just like an easy how-to workbook, step-by-step workbook. I worked through the whole book, and I still work through it sometimes today. And that's like a big springboard for all the other systems, because it's just easy to get through and understand. It's like most of the stuff that was out there before that was a lot of like translated grimoires. So you didn't really have, and a lot of them are hard to understand because they're translated from Latin and French and it don't translate well. And it's like, they don't really give you, it's not really written for the modern era.
day.
Yeah. So that book is one of the easiest things to start with, but it's something you still got to stick with. Ceremonial magic, I guess one of the hardest things for people to do is really to stick to a routine, because it's all about building your consciousness, building your magical persona in front of the spirits. And then, like, if you're working with a group, it's all about building the egregor. And if anybody doesn't know what an egregor is, it's kind of like a group consciousness that where everybody's focused on the same thing, that kind of becomes its own entity in a sense. It's like its own subconscious and consciousness combined as one. Like any, whether it be a church group or a coven or whatever, that's kind of like what you focus on. It's like one focus point. So like there's these sets of practices that get you in tuned with the group egregor, so that when you get together and do group work, you guys, there's all the energy is being directed, to a single point that everybody knows, what's going on, and there's no conflict in that. And then there's, well, go on.
And we've reached the portion of our show where I sit here and I talk about our sponsor of the day, which is Crystal Turtle Collections. They have a variety of handmade items that are infused with crystals, along with a little bit of everything, so you can get all your witching needs in one-stop shop. Also, they work with different local crafters in the area, so when you support Crystal Turtle Collections, you also support the local crafting community as well. So make sure to go to their Facebook page and like the page. Tell them that we sent you. And also, while you're liking things, like us here on YouTube or on Spotify or wherever you are listening to us. Till then, let's continue.
But then you get into ideas of like cosmic meditation, which is the idea of going to the astral plane and working with deity or spirit as a group. And you're kind of, it's kind of like a symbiotic relationship. You're given spirit energy and they're, teaching you at the same time.
All right. So what tools do you personally suggest for those who are starting out? Like, I know that there's a few that differ. Some say the chalice, the sword, the shield. What is it for you that you would highly recommend?
Well, the main tool, as most of you probably know, is the athame. I mean, you need that beyond anything, because you use that for casting circle and banishing. That's one of the first things you learn, and you should learn if you're practicing any form of magic, is how to banish. Because if you're working with spirits, especially you find one you don't like, you may need to get rid of it real quick.
That happens often, more than not, more than people think. So let's talk about possession and trance work when it comes into ceremonial magic. How do I put this? How does that work for you?
Well, two different things. Possession is spirit entering the human form or human body, and sometimes it could be subtle, sometimes it could be exorcist, but which is rare, very, very rare. Well, and that just kind of continues from what I just talked about, banishing. That's the thing about, especially with ceremonial magic, is like everything has to be blessed, and you have to do this ceremony for each tool, so you can use it. And sometimes it's used to control certain elemental spirits or certain spirits in general, so that when something like that, when you are dealing with possession, you know how to control it. Or remove it if need be. But then you have other ceremonies that, you're purposely having yourself possessed, or you have somebody else there who's possessed, and whatever entity it being will speak through that person, which is kind of, I guess you would think of the same way as a Ouija board, but in flesh. But you also,
Right.
like, the danger in that is, like, the person who is controlling everything, you need to make sure that they know what they're doing so that they can get rid of it when need be. Trance work, so it's the same idea as self-hypnosis. So you're going into, you either astral projecting or going out of body. Ideally, you would be raising your consciousness, but I mean, that's not always the case. And either that's giving you more of a spirit communication contact, or deity contact, or you're just astral traveling. And there's 100 different forms of doing it.
Okay, give me a second. I thought you were going to go a little bit longer than that. So let me see what I got for you, because I got my little cheat sheet. Okay, so the next one is actually from a subscriber on our YouTube channel. And they want to know how you use sex magic in your ceremonial rituals, if at all.
Okay, well, first, a disclaimer. If you're practicing sex magic, it should be with somebody that you're already having sex with, that you're already in some type of sexual relationship with. And it should never be anybody that tells you that you have to have sex in this ritual to gain something. It should never be the case. So just have to put that out there first.
That's how cults are made.
Yes, exactly. So, you should always be, both participants should always be willing. So there's different forms of sex magic. So for couples, so your first form would be it's kind of like spell work, where you enter ritual space, and then the both of you've got a goal in mind. Like, again, it's something simple, like, say you want to get a certain amount of money or something. You guys would both focus on that as you're having sex. And then it's more about the feminine aspect to have the orgasm rather than the masculine. And it's kind of like the masculine's feeding the energy, the feminine's drawing in the energy, and then it's her orgasm, or their orgasm, sorry, is what's going to project that energy out into the universe. So it's kind of like the feminine would be the altar, and the male is sending that energy through her. And then the second kind of sex magic would be, now this is more along the lines of drawing in energy together to bond that relationship. So think of it kind of like tantric yoga, but you're doing more of a ritual aspect. It's kind of really, you can start off doing tantric yoga, and then you both are meditating and visualizing the same thing, drawing in the same energy and working that together, which builds your relationship together. You're ultimately becoming one being as you're working together. And then you have solo practices on your own. One being, of course, the same way as the first one I talked about, where you're sending out that energy. And then there is this idea of working with deity or spirit. And again, you're doing this, this is all, you're doing this through sacred space. So it should be treated as any other ritual. You're just adding the orgasm element to it. to send out that energy. But when you're working with spirit, it should be by their permission. It's just not like you go into a ritual and it's like, oh, I'm going to have sex with this deity and visualize that. It's probably a bad idea. You should wait for, again, it should wait for that deity's consent. So this is the best way I describe it. So, I mean, there's different forms of it.
So when it comes to that sexual magic energy, like me personally, I always say it's about the buildup on how you do it, because the more energy you bring in, the more longer you elongate it, that more concentration when you hit that climax state. So with that being said, we've hit the climax on this topic, so let's move on. With that being said, now when it comes to offering, a lot of people over the last couple of years have asked me, what you're offering to Hecate, what you're offering with this. When it comes to ceremonial magic in particular, is there certain offerings that are more favorable, or does it actually depend on who you're working with?
Yeah, it depends on who you're working with. Like when I'm working with the Morgan, her being my main deity, I mean, of course, I've got personal things that I offer her, but I'll give her whiskey, and every once in a while, I'll might offer her cooked steak or milk. Those are things specific to her. Whereas versus if I'm giving offerings to like Egyptian deities, there's a lot of wheat and honey involved as far as food offerings, and then wine. Or if I'm doing Greek deities, of course, they're big on wine as far as offerings go. And it really just, and in specific deities, it really just depends, things that are attached or symbolic to their lore.
All right. And speaking of symbolic, let's go to your Celtic side a little bit and tell us about your new little group that people can find information on, and what got you wanting to not necessarily leave Ohio Valley Pagan Society, but branch off to where you're more focused on the Celtic aspects.
So all my paths that I've practiced pretty much lead me to this Celtic path. As I stated at the beginning of when I started, it was the goddess, the Morgan, who came to me, and it was with her is like it was like she directed me on what to practice, on where to go, who to see. I would just kind of follow her guidance, and then I was trying to build a practice for her, specifically for her, because there wasn't nothing out there, and there's not a lot out there that was specifically Celtic as far as a Celtic practice. I mean, there's Wicca, but Wicca's Wicca, and Wicca's not
right.
Religious practice. I mean, it's a religious practice, but it's its own thing. So like everything I'm doing has been working through that. So I've always been working with the Celtic stuff on the side, and now I decided to focus more on it fully. As far as learning the language, the Irish language, learning the lore, the history, the archaeology, all of that. So I started this group recently, which is called Fiach Cree Hearth, which is Irish for Ravenheart Hearth. And in this group is more, we're focused on studying the language, the lore, and the archaeology, and honoring the gods, and working with the Celtic deities and holidays. I wanted to mention too, kind of got ahead of myself here, but like also what led me up to this is that one of the tasks the Morgan had me do was write out an actual ritual magic program specifically devoted to her, and I've been giving that to people here and there that work with the Morgan, to let them work through it. And then with Fiach Cree Hearth, it's all about the entirety of the Irish pantheon, and working all that together. So That's just been my focus. And it's just, I guess with doing the pagan community stuff, it's, it's just, it takes up pretty much all of my time. So I had to step back and not do as much as what I'm trying to do now, because I was just doing so much and I'm getting that burnout. I mean, I've been doing it for over 10 years now.
Hit the wall.
Yeah.
I know that feeling.
And so like, I just needed to step back and just focus on me and my stuff that I needed to, work through my spiritual practice, and that being the Celtic Pantheon. And it's just, putting that out there so people can find, sorry, other Celtic pagans can find out and we can work together, because, we're a pretty small group.
See, it's so funny being like Greek eclectic. I always feel like Norse and Celtic and all that is a bigger group, because that's what you hear most about. And occasionally I'll get people who are Greek and I'm like, oh my God, hi. But it's like, it's like a Pokemon or something.
See, I meet a lot of Greek dedicants. Probably almost as much as I meet with Norse. So, Norse is probably the biggest thing right now. For Celts, man, it's like few and far between, unless you're a Druid and you study Druidry, then, you're a little, find a few more. But as far as like solo practitioners,
right.
Many.
So when it comes to the Morgan, there's a lot of people who get confused on the symbolism between her and Hecate. I get that a lot. Like, how can I tell the difference? So with that being said, that's my first question. How can you tell the difference? And two, since you said that she came to you, is that a story you wish to share or no?
Well, to answer your first question, really Hecate is more akin to Bridget than she would be Marion, because Hecate is, a goddess of witchcraft in the hearth, in the home. She's more personal. She works with, the common people, as versus Morgan, her name itself, it means the great queen. So she's got this royalty thing. She's a goddess of magic, but she's not necessarily part of the hearth. She's more, akin to working with the dead, a guide of the dead. She's magic, sovereignty, and that type of thing. But Bridget, she is of the hearth. She is of craftsmanship. She's of magic. So like, that's why I don't really understand what people like confuse Hecate with Morgan, when she's more, more like Bridget in that aspect.
I think it would be more of the spiritual descent, the association with land, sea, sky, the underworld, when you're coming from a Greek perspective, and then you know how it goes.
Yeah.
Symbolism with the gods is vast, especially when it comes to animals, signs, symbols, things like that. There may be similarities, but there's always differences. So speaking of similarities within your path, what other gods or spirits do you work with, for one? And two, normally in different traditions, when they're calling the elements, they have different names for those elements as far as the directional paths. Is Celtic have some sort of version of that?
Like the names of the elements, or just?
Yeah.
So Irish specifically, so you have the four treasures, which is the sword of light, which is Nuada sword, and you have Luke's spear, you have Dagdas Cauldron, and then you have the stone of destiny, I think you pronounced, and they all correspond to the elements. So you would have, so the sword of light, knew out of sword, would be air, was hour, and Irish, and then Luke's spears, fire, just Tana, and then the cauldron being Ishka, Ushka for water, and then the stone being north. And then you have the four, I'm not going to bring it for it right now. There's the four kingdoms associated with each one. So, I mean, so yeah, they do translate into four elements with Celtic.
Don't you just love those questions that make you think and you're like, I know it, but I'm like,
Yeah, just trying to remember all the names.
So with your path, since you do different forms of magic, when it comes to your circle casting, is it pretty much the same as any other circle casting? Or is there something that you do within the Celtic system that makes it more towards that path?
Well, I had to build my own path, or not my own path. Well, I did have to build my own path, but I had to build my own ritual circle because there was nothing out there. But I used a basis from, I guess you would consider it ceremonial, because after working ceremonial magic, you get used to doing these long elaborate rituals. So you, like, if you're not doing that,
Right.
I need more. So I just kind of built my own thing, wrote my own thing out. So I have a regular opening ritual, and a lot of it's in Irish Gaelic.
Is that the one you used before at Ohio Valley Pagan Society?
Yeah, that's one I normally use.
The one I was like, oh my God, I hate you so much when I looked at it and I was like, ah.
Yeah, it's a hard language to learn.
Especially on the spot.
Yeah. It's I think the hardest thing about it is that, because like normally when you're learning a language, you'll have like vowels and consonant clusters that make a certain sound. So, and like the vowel clusters were pretty simple. It's like these two letters make this sound. And then when I got to the consonant clusters, that was a whole nother thing. It was they gave you a map, and it's like these two clusters and these two clusters together will make this sound, and then if it's with this, it'll make this sound, and then if it's Tuesday, then it'll make this sound over here, and then this sound will make this sound. Why? Because it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Right. And I got the little short version, like, here's a paper. And I'm like,
right.
Yeah, after that day, I was like, if he does that to me again, I'm going to kill him. Speaking of killing things, when it comes to ritual clothing, what does your garb look like? Is it a certain thing that you put together? Is it more traditional? Is it a little bit of both? Or do you just go skyclad?
Well, some personal rituals I'll do skyclad, but it kind of just, my current ritual clothing, it was kind of a combination of things. I wear red pants, white robe, and a black overrobe. And so when I first started out with rune magic, there was those certain clothing I was wearing, and one of those were red pants. And then
So if you don't mind me asking, what's the symbolism with the red pants?
Well, from what I've read, that people of significance in Viking culture wore red pants, being magicians or go thieves or diviners or whatnot. From what I read, I don't know. I haven't looked into the actual history. So, and that was part of our garb for the Brune Guild. It was usually red pants with a blue shirt. And then when I started doing Golden Dawn magic, well, we had white robes. So, and it was the white dowel robes with the long sleeves at the end. And then so I added that. And then when I was doing Alexandrian witchcraft, I was wearing black robes. So, and then when I got done, I'm like, I'm wearing red, white, and black. That is all the colors of the Morrigan. She snuck that in. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
You're like, well, okay, this is my life now.
Yeah.
So speaking of your life now, for those here in Ohio, they know that you run the Ohio or Cincinnati's Witches Ball.
Uh-huh.
So this is your last year doing it. You want to talk about it?
Well, this is the first time anybody's hearing that. So
I know. I figured they'd get the tea here.
No, no, it's a lot of fun. It's just a lot more work than I have time and money for. Because raising money for it is really difficult, and it's a lot to run. And the venue I work with, the folks at Leap and Lizard, they've been excellent. They were some of the greatest people I've worked with as far as venues go. They really love having it there. And it was really, it was great to be handed it to, Bonnie, who used to run it. And she decided she wanted me to take it over.
I remember when you got it, you were so excited. You were like,
Yeah.
guess what I'm doing?
Yeah, and and I was like, going all the way back to my fire performing days. I already knew how to run events and make them successful, and I knew my audience, and I knew how to cater to them and give them what they wanted. So the first year that, well, we were supposed to do it in 2019 and then, or 2020, sorry. And of course, COVID happened, so we couldn't do it. So the first one was last year, and we had over 400 people show up. I was surprised. It was a huge success, and it was a lot of fun. We're doing it again this year, and it's just, I would really like to keep doing it. It's just funding and time.
Well, since it is your last year and we're spilling the tea, so to speak, are you going to do something big and fun with it? I mean, if you're going to go out, you might as well go out with a bang, right?
This year, we're doing a 1920s theme, Roaring 20s. It's got burlesque dancers coming. See, we have burlesque dancers. We have a belly dance troupe. Cindy West is going to be DJing for us again, and she's bringing a goth club favorite, Christopher Favorite, is going to be joining her for DJ. And we're still trying to get our band canceled, so we're trying to find a new band. So still a lot of work, and that will be out. You should be able to buy tickets by the end of the weekend. So we'll have that up.
Yeah, because a lot of people have been asking me, because I'm like spreading the word like the gospel. And I'm like, I don't know. It'll come up when it comes up. It's like all good things. You got to work it to pop it. So
the entertainers keep changing on us. So it's like we have them, we don't have them.
This is the perfect platform to use. I mean, we'll get to your details here in a little bit.
Yeah.
But, use the platform wisely. Get people. Anyway, with that being said, let's talk about the Pagan Picnic, because that is another one you've been throwing around that you need a break from. And I have conned you into joining forces with me. Yeah. Want to talk about it?
Well, my idea is that I was just going to do the 4 Celtic festivals, which is Samhain, Imbolc, Lunasa, and Bealtaine. And I was just going to focus on doing those and just doing public rituals. But Lunasa is usually part of the Pagan Picnic, so might keep doing that. It's just what I have time for right now, honestly. And then I'll be helping you with the Witch in the Woods, and sure we'll do stuff there. So.
Right. Gods know I need help with the Witch in the Woods. All right. So with that being said, where can people reach you?
Um, well, there's my website, mysticmorgan.com. There's Ohio Valley Pagan Society website, which is ohvpaganisociety.com. And then my Celtic group is ravenhearthearth.com.
All right. And just so everyone out there knows, as always, when it comes to anything on this channel, we'll make sure to link it all down below as soon as I get the references that were referenced. No puns intended. So with that being said, always remember, friends, no two witches what you like.